Hey, welcome back to Coffee with Cagnetta. I have a very special guest with me, Bob Swindell from the Broward Alliance, and he is basically Broward's number one fan. How about that?
That's a good way to describe it.
Is it?
I'm lucky as a kid who grew up in Broward County. It's nice to have the job that I have. I never realized all those years ago that I was preparing for this role I've got today. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And when I first heard about the opportunity, it was a good friend of mine. She mentioned there was an open opportunity at the Alliance, and I said, "Well, what does the Alliance do?" I wasn't really sure.
Yeah,
And so
sure.
she said, "Well, you're sort of, you're going to be pitching Broward County to people all over the country and even internationally." I'm like, "Well, I know Broward County pretty well. I think I'd be well qualified for that job." And I drilled into it a little bit more, but it's been a blast. I've been there since
I
2003.
was just about to ask. It's been 20 years?
It's funny
I think
that
I remember you getting that
yeah,
job.
JT Tarleton was the CEO
Yes,
at the
I
time.
remember.
He took a big risk on hiring a guy who didn't know the first thing about economic development. I was a small business owner, so I had, business background, but didn't know the first thing about economic development. It was funny, 2003, the internet was not as robust as it is today, right? So I'm
Right.
doing all my research online, economic development, trying to get a handle on, the aspects of the job so I could have a decent interview with JT. We knew each other socially. We were on a couple of board of directors together.
Yeah.
Um, but I made it, I won't say it was a mistake. JT at one point asked me, "So how long are you planning to be in this job?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, 3, 5 years." Because my expectation was once I've learned everything I could learn, it's probably time to move on and do something else.
Right.
And, I've been on those boards where the executive director has been working at it for 20 years and it's the same old stuff. And I said, I don't want to be that guy.
Right.
Um, and JT, made him pause on bringing me on board because he wanted more stability than that.
Well,
And so I had to come back for a third interview and explain my answer a little more thoroughly. I said, "Listen, I've been on the other side of the interview session more often than not, and I want honest answers back." So, and JT would get a chuckle because we stay in contact.
yeah.
Because I really owe the opportunity to him.
Hmm.
But 20 some years later, I'm still doing it, which means it's a lot of fun. Every day is different. We work with, every kind of company under the sun. And so without knowing really what the job is going to entail, you learn pretty quickly that it doesn't get boring.
Yeah, I can imagine. So real quick, just to roll back, what were you doing right before that? Because I knew you before that.
Yeah.
What was
So
the
for,
position?
for almost 20 years, I had an industrial supply company. It was a family owned business.
Right.
Took it over from my parents. My dad, he loved boating. So he'd gotten his captain's license and he got his 200-ton license. And he really wanted to pursue that more. So when I came back from college, I got involved in the business and bought the business from them, and they moved up to Stewart, and so I ran Champion for about 18 years. But we were a
Right.
industrial supply company, originally focused primarily on Southeast Florida, and then we expanded up into the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. I had a branch in
Wow.
Pensacola. I was just telling somebody today, I was at lunch. I said, Delta had a commuter airline called Comair back in the day in the 80s and 90s, and it was great for getting around Florida. So if I had to go to Tampa or Pensacola, they were a phenomenal airline, just really reliable, and that was part of the Delta network. So that was great. But yeah, we grew the business and sold it in 2001 to a friend of mine. It's one of those things. We've always had a handshake agreement that if either of us ever wanted to sell, we'd call the other
Right.
first. And we met a couple times a year to just catch up on, how are you compensating your
Right.
salespeople and how are you hiring and new items. And we would go in on, we'd buy stuff together because each of us were pretty small. And we had some nationwide competitors that we had to, from a pricing standpoint, had
Sure.
to be able to compete. So when we combined our buying power, it made us more competitive.
Hmm.
So Bill and I became good friends, and it's funny now. They had their 60th anniversary a couple years ago when my dad was still alive. Bill called me and he's like, "You guys have to come up because you were a big part of our growth, acquiring you guys because they were concentrated mostly in the Northeast,
Right.
but adding us into their mix gave them a good exposure in the southeastern U.S." So I flew up with my dad,
Oh,
and
so
uh,
nice.
and so many of the guys. He was a great sales trainer. He was a consummate salesman, and it was great because so many of those guys came up and gals came up to my dad and said, "You really had a huge impact on my
Hmm.
life," and they're still working for the company, right?
Wow.
All these years later. So Cindy McMillan, who was my vice president of sales, closest thing I have to a sister, She's now Bill's VP of sales, and she's still with the company, and we still stay in contact regularly. But yeah, I did that for almost 20 years. Sold the business and then was at a loss. What am I going to do next, right? Because
Right.
I'd worked for myself for so long, and the opportunity with the alliance came up, and it was just very fortunate timing for me. Nothing expected. Sometimes when I work with high school students and spend time with them, they're like, "Well, so how did you prepare for your job in economic development?" Well, sometimes life's lessons help you, and
Yeah,
sometimes it's
sure.
just dumb luck, and there's a turn in the road, and you got to take it and jump on it and give it a try.
So, yeah, and it's funny you mentioned JT. Of course, I remember JT in that position. Again, I got here in '95, so it wasn't that many years that I knew him in that position. But you have kind of become Mr. Broward. I mean, certainly one of, again, the biggest advocate, biggest fan. And I've watched you and I've heard from you give some of the reports at the Broward Workshop, of course, and talking about recruiting some of the big companies down here. Let's talk a little bit about what makes Broward special. What what
So yeah, this is one of the things I love talking about, right? It's when you think about our airport, you exit your plane, you're at the gate, you walk to your Uber car or a car that's picking you up, and less than 15 minutes later, you're in downtown Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah,
I
that's pretty
mean,
special.
it's incredibly special when you think
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
your 15 minutes to the beach from downtown. There's so many choices for lifestyle. If you're an active boater, you know, there's
Right.
no end of those opportunities. If you just like the water and you want to be near the beach, we've got, great residential choices. We also have equestrian communities, right? So when we're talking to executives and people from other parts of the country, part of it is, laying out for them what a diverse community Broward is, and it's 2 million people, and we're sort of sandwiched between Miami and Palm Beach, which are more recognizable names. But when people begin to realize the scale of this community and the scale of the region, it makes it pretty powerful. I think the other thing that makes us really special is that we're a young community, right? So,
Yeah.
if, and you know this from the Broward Workshop, if you're a talented executive and you move your business here and you want to get involved in the community, the door is pretty much open, right? If
Yeah,
if
sure.
you're competent and do what you say you're gonna do and wanna get involved, you're welcomed into the community. There are a lot of communities, even still in Florida, that, part of the process, well, who's your grandfather? And what's your pedigree to be a part of this organization? And because we're young, and I tell companies this, listen, if it really is moving your family and moving yourself, you're going to be building a brand new network of friends and connections in the community. You can do that really quickly here because, you know, that's part of our DNA, right? A lot of folks have come from other areas. They've acclimated here.
Yeah.
Um, but the door's open, right? And there's not a whole lot of barriers to getting involved if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I was gonna mention 2 things from that. Number 1, we do have some pretty stiff competitors on both ends of us, right? By both Miami and West Palm. But I think your comment of openness is striking because I've worked in some nonprofit areas in both of those counties as well. And yeah, I mean, it definitely is sort of a still old money slash who are you to come into Miami? Who are you to come into West Palm Beach? That's not true down here.
Very true. It's a unique distinction,
No
and
shade against those those
yeah, no, and I will tell you, my counterparts in Palm Beach, Kelly Smallridge, and Rod
yeah,
Miller, my
Kelly's great.
counterpart in Miami-Dade at the Beacon Council,
And it
they're
may be changing a little bit up in Palm Beach for sure.
yeah, well, I think all of Florida's
Changing.
changing to that degree,
Right.
and especially South Florida. But, while we do compete, we also do a lot of work together because we realize we're talking about a region of 6 million people.
Yeah,
It's a compelling market in itself,
sure.
for business here, but you're also drawing a workforce from a large area. We're working on our transit connections, but that's stuff that's important to us as a community, and we've made it a priority in Broward, with the penny sales tax for transportation. But that connectivity and that availability of workforce is really what companies are looking for now.
Yeah, and all the things that go into it, education, affordable housing, good places to hire people from. We have great universities down here. We have a lot of public-private partnership things going on. What are some of the exciting things going on down here now? I mean, there's tons. I mean,
Yeah.
just the developments.
Well, we touched on it at the beginning, but It's June 17th. I don't know when this is gonna air, but this is game 6 for the Florida Panthers, home game on ice. If they win tonight's game, it's game 4. They win the, Stanley
Yeah,
Cup. It's huge for us, and, it's interesting. I was talking to Commissioner, Udine. He serves on the Alliance
sure.
board, and he's become
We had him in this seat,
Did you
actually.
really?
Yes.
He is one of the best cheerleaders we have for business.
Yeah, I agree.
When I introduce business people and he's one of our policymakers, they're like, "Wow, I mean, there's a guy that wants to get things done."
Yeah,
But we were talking the other day just about the economic impact that the Florida Panthers have had on South Florida, particularly Broward. The other part is nothing can bring a community together like professional sports.
sure.
We dwell a lot in having these conversations about how divided we are as a nation, as a state. But when you watch fans roll out for the Panthers, you know, that brings the community together, and they are such a community-focused team. It starts with the leadership. Mr.
There.
Viola
Yes.
has just been he and his wife Teresa have been phenomenal for this community. But then the team that they've built, the leadership team with Matt Caldwell as CEO, Bill Zito as the general manager, uh, you know, Paul Maurice is just an amazing coach. All these elements have come together. And then you look at the players themselves. Um, so here's a funny story. So, and you've hopefully have seen this, but about 9 months ago, I was talking to Matt Caldwell. I'm like, it'd be really nice if we could get Matthew Tkachuk to just do a quick little video on why he likes living in Fort Lauderdale. And Matt looked at me and he's like, "Well, Bob, that's an interesting idea." He said, "You realize how many barriers are to doing something like that?" I'm like, "Well, so explain them to me." He's like, "Well, he's a professional athlete, he's under contract, his image." I'm like, "Yeah, I get all that, but if we checked all those boxes, do you think we could do it? We're nonprofit, not we're just trying to tell Broward's story,
Right.
right?" And so Matt's like, "Well, all right, well, let me check with Matthew first, and then we'll sort of figure out the process to do this." And so he talked to Matthew, and Matthew is such a nice guy. He's like, "Of course, I'd be happy to do that."
Wow.
So he was totally unscripted. We sat him down on the Iceplex. He just talked about what he loves about living in this community, and how it's different than other communities he's lived in.
Yeah.
And he talked about things that I never even would have thought about, like recovery time. He's like, "Bob," he said, you know, "after I play a game, the next day or two, your body's recovering. It's a grueling sport, as we all know." But he said, "My recovery time has never been faster." And he said, "A part of that is the people that I'm surrounded by here." He says, "Everybody seems positive. It's a beautiful place to live. I can be out on the golf course." Matthew loves the water like a lot of people who live in South Florida. He's really adapted to that. He's like, "I get to drive a golf cart to work when I go to the
Yeah, I
Iceplex."
know
I
they
said,
they all do.
"That's pretty cool, right?" Um, but he talks about, and we have it playing right now in the baggage claim areas and at all 4 terminals at FLL, and we've got over 1 million views so far on YouTube. But it was a blast working with him and doing that. But we had no idea that many months ago, and it took a while to get all the pieces together that we would be enjoying a Stanley Cup
Another
run
run.
again. So, but that's the big thing that's happening right now. But when you look at, you mentioned public-private partnerships and some of the new projects. When you look at what the Panthers did at War Memorial
Yeah, that's
Auditorium,
incredible.
Iceplex. I had lunch with
YMCA coming there now.
I had lunch with Jerry Plush today, and he's a huge hockey fan, Philly guy, and he's like, that is one of the best practice areas, best practice facilities in the country. And
Yeah,
I'm not as knowledgeable about hockey nationwide
right.
or throughout North America, but Jerry was like, it's a phenomenal facility. And to your point, we're doing our annual dinner there now, but we've go to the Federal for dinner or watch an away game. It's such a great facility. But it also lends itself to Vinny Viola, right? And
Yeah.
his commitment to military and taking something that was important to this community as a War Memorial Auditorium and, not only
Reviving it. I mean, really bringing it back to life.
without a
It
doubt.
needed it.
Yeah.
It needed it.
And, as Matt would say, that renovation, when you do a renovation, you open up a wall, you're not sure what you're going to run into. It was a bigger investment that was anticipated, but they never shied away from that, right? They did it the right thing. They just made it made it into a beautiful facility. And it starts at the top, right? But that kind of community engagement is so important for us. I mean, it's great for hosting. I mean, we've got some VIPs in our box tonight for the hockey game. And I'll tell you,
And Matt will stop by.
he will.
I mean, I think one of the great things about the Panther organization is how approachable they are. We haven't had an approachable owner of a sports team like that since Wayne.
You're right, without a doubt.
And Wayne was, you know,
Wayne was Wayne.
Wayne was the gold standard. I
Yeah.
mean, "Hey, buddy, how you doing?" And, like, he was sitting at hot dog heaven having a hot dog, being able to at YOLO having lunch every day, being able to talk to him. But, that's what Matt and, Vinny and everybody there is just they're amazing.
Yeah, Bruce Hallwig, their chief operating officer, is the same way. I've got a lot of great funny stories with Matt and Bryce, but it's really about, how they're committed to the community, and they're just, to your point, approachable people.
Right.
So I went to Boyd Anderson High School here.
There you go.
I'm a local kid,
Cobra?
and
Cobras?
Cobra, very
All right,
good,
thank you.
very good.
They're local here. They're
So yeah,
actually local
yeah,
to us, and we've
very.
done some things with them, so it's been great.
That's I'm glad to hear that. The current principal, James Griffin, is a phenomenal principal.
I should
Really,
meet him,
really good.
actually. That'd be
You
great.
should.
Yeah.
He would be. You talk about providing opportunities for kids. They have a synthetic ice rink at Boyd Anderson. The only
Really?
synthetic ice rink in all of South Florida or Florida. One of the few in the country. It was donated by Anthony Duclair, a former player, Panthers player, of Haitian descent. Family immigrated to Canada. He learned to play hockey, and he played for the Panthers for a little while. But he donated the ice rink to Boyd Anderson. So I get a text last year from Principal Griffin saying, "Is there any chance we can get the Stanley Cup here at Boyd Anderson?" I'm like, Principal Griffin, I don't know. That's a big ask. I said, let me see what I can do. But I'll tell you what, the Panthers made it happen. And you talk about two assemblies full of high school kids, all excited because Principal Griffin spent time in assemblies talking about the Stanley Cup, why it's such a prestigious trophy, why it is the most coveted professional sports trophy out there.
Yeah, I agree. I'll
Um,
agree with that
yeah.
by
So,
far.
uh, but it was a great experience. Bryce brought the trophy to the high school, and it was a hell of a day. I mean, the students really had a good time. But that's just one small example of how much they do for our community.
It's crazy. And and just other things going on in the community. I mean, I know you're involved a lot with other nonprofits. We do a lot. I really love the way this community works together. So I think, and is that one of your selling points? Talk about how you bring some big corporations. What's the pitch? Like, how do you do that?
So I'll first touch on one thing that you asked about earlier because it really it weaves into this really well. You know, over the years, the alliance I think has grown into a well recognized, influential organization in our community, and a big part of that is the collaboration. And collaboration is a word that people throw out left and right,
Mm,
but I will tell you that's part of the DNA of Broward County. I have people that move here from other parts of the state, and they just pull me aside and say, it doesn't work like this, in the county I just came from. They talk about it, but it doesn't work the same way. You think about Kathleen Cannon, the CEO of our United Way, Jenny Morholm, the head of our DDA, Kareem Boutros, the executive director of the Broward Workshop. Kelly Shanley was one I always went to when he was at the Broward Center of Performing Arts. Now that he's at the Center of Innovation at NSU, but these are leaders that our port director, our airport director, Mark Gale, Joe Morris is our new port director. Not only do we collaborate, we actually like one another and we get along. And and Kelly Shanley and I've had this conversation over the last decade, right? How important that is for a community.
mm,
That when we're bringing a major business in and we want to talk to them, and at one boardroom table we have the president of the Broward College, we have the superintendent of public schools, we have the port director there, we have the airport director there. Again, depends on the company,
sure.
but when I walk away from those meetings, and if they're working with a site selection consultant, they'll pull me aside and they said, this is sort of crazy. He said, in other communities we've been to, this was 6 meetings. You had it in 1 meeting here in Broward County. And we could just tell that not only were people there because you asked them to be there, but you guys actually work together and like one another. And that's not always the case. And, unfortunately, as people change in their positions, that continuity, because it's sort of the baton's been handed, right? Like when Joe Morris became the new port director, his predecessor said, "Hey, the relationship with the alliance is really important." And so Joe makes it a priority. Like Joe was with us when we did our leadership trip to Boston back in April. But that baton is passed. So the personality is different, but because the person coming in, we have so many demands on our time, but the part of the secret and why we're successful as a community is just that. And it's the same thing for me. If, we've been working on our port expansion for a long time. If Joe Morris needs me to fly to Tallahassee or Washington to talk about it from a broader business community, why this expansion is important to our port, at the drop of a hat, I'll do it. Right. And
Right.
so we have each other's back to some degree,
Yeah.
but all those things really draw together. You think about our career source, Broward board. Carol Hilton is doing a great job. And Mason Jackson before her was phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
Um, but again, it's that continuity of leadership. It's people coming together, understanding that we each have a role in this and we
Right.
work well together. Sometimes I think the alliance in the past may have been, a little too eager to take credit for things.
Right.
And I make it very clear that this was a win for the community.
Yeah, sure.
And even a company coming in here, if I've got the president of Broward College sitting across the table, assuring the CEO that we can train and provide you the workforce that you're going to need when you need them, that has a lot more impact on that CEO making a decision than if I said it,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So, and that's part of what makes Broward County really special.
Yeah, and it is giving back too. Like, I know you and John were the co-hosts of the Mayor's Gala this year, and you're very involved with United Way, sitting on another nonprofit
Yeah.
basically and helping them out. And you're right, Kathleen is just an amazing nonprofit leader in this community. So, just kudos. So, what are some of the favorite things you love to do around town?
So,
You've been here forever, so
yeah.
like you are well qualified for this.
Well, boating is my favorite thing, right? And
Right,
for me, it's I live close to New River,
right.
and I had a boat, sold my boat. Now I'm very boat envious. So we have a local entrepreneur.
Just means you're taking a little time off.
Well, yeah, it's um, we have a local entrepreneur, and she started a company called Boat Setter,
Oh, there you of course.
and great, great idea. It's
Yep.
an entrepreneur from Fort Lauderdale, Broward County. Her business is doing really well, so I've used her app to take a boat out for a day. And while I miss not having my own boat, it's nice when you come back to the dock and you hand the keys over to the owner and
Let
they
somebody
take it
else
from
clean
there,
it.
right? Yeah, exactly. Any other maintenance issues they
Right.
take care of. So, but I love going out on the New River. I recently, added to my plate, which I've been trying to take things off my plate. But I got involved with the Marine advisory board for Fort Lauderdale, because clearly, the yachting community is an important economic driver for us, and we can't take it for granted. And people think, I've had this conversation with many elected official and policymaker, that their first impression is it's a bunch of billionaires smoking cigars floating around on their multi-million-dollar yachts. I said, but do you realize how many mom and pop small businesses those yachts support?
I know. I
And
know for a
it's
fact.
yeah.
We sell a lot of them.
So
I mean,
you can be the stabilizer business, the water maker
the
business. I
canvas
mean,
guys, like with the cleaning, the caterers, I mean, we've had them all. We've had the engine repair guys. We've had, you know, Dollar Marine. I mean, we've worked with all of a lot of these companies over there.
and it's a huge business for us. I mean, a yacht changes hands, it's all new linens, new plates because the new owner wants to have their stamp on the yacht. And so all those things fuel, thousands and thousands of jobs in Broward County, and more so for us than other parts of South Florida. But the New River is the highway that our yachts use to get to the repair yards for the most part. There are a few over on Dania Cutoff Canal, but you know, we as a community have to make sure that that river is the best navigable waterway that we can make it be, and that's part of the reason I got involved because when I saw the investments that our companies are making, as a kid growing up here, the yacht repair yards are mostly in downtown, like
Right.
Norseman. There were a ton of yacht repair and sailboat repair companies that were right in the heart of downtown
Yeah.
on the river. And as that land became more and more desirable, families were given the option. Well, you could work in this business for 30 years and make X, or you could really
Sell
sell
it.
your property.
Sure.
And you're changing generational ownership, sometimes it's a hard decision. But if you're able to move west on the river, which a lot of these folks did, and you look at the investments they're making out on State Road 84, new travel lifts. These yachts are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. When I was a kid growing up here, I mean, a 60-foot yacht was huge. Now today it's a tender for one of these mega yachts, right? So But that business is really important from a retention play, and that's one of the reasons. One of the other organizations I didn't mention was Marine Industries Association. They have the annual boat show, biggest boat show in the world. What a great hosting opportunity for us, right? And when I came to the alliance, we weren't really leveraging that as a hosting opportunity like we should have. And it was one of the first things that I was, well, why aren't we? Is and Marine Industries, they were involved with us, but it was we never really had formulated an ask and say, well, if we've got these really, obviously if they're involved in yachting, they're probably business decision makers. They're coming to Fort Lauderdale voluntarily to be here. What a great opportunity. I mean, there are communities that would host an event for hundreds of thousands of dollars to entice a couple of these people to come visit. We get them coming here almost every year. Why aren't we taking better advantage of that? So, for about a decade now, we've been having a lunch at the boat show on the opening day. Phil Purcell and Howard Greenberg have been, super hosts and drivers in that. But yeah, but again, that's leveraging some of our assets and our relationships to take advantage of people while they're in town and really reinforce what a great community this is.
I was lucky enough to live on the New River for a year while I was redoing my house in Hollywood, and it's becoming a canyon. I
Yeah.
mean, which is good and bad, but it's mostly good. I think it's going to be great when they finish the south side of the river when you can walk all the way up and down. I used to walk all the way around,
Yep.
going all the way down to the Performing Arts Center, and I think it's fantastic. I mean, what they've done with the Riverwalk, and once they get the other side going too, it's gonna be fantastic. And so, are we gonna build a bridge or are we gonna build a tunnel?
That's a great question. I
It's a
think,
$1,000,000
if
$1,000,000,000 question.
money wasn't an issue, but
We'd
money is always an issue.
Right,
But if money wasn't an issue, I think it's unanimous we would want a tunnel, right? I think
right.
we can, there are some concerns about resiliency, and we do have this, our high tides are getting, more severe, especially king tides during the fall. Um, but the reality is, especially in today's environment in Washington, we see less and less, of these dollars being put toward projects like that. So, um, yeah, so the reality is, it'll probably be a bridge, but I think with all the intent and I give our city leadership credit for making a point of how important it is for them not to divide our city, right? And that will not happen. But if you design a bridge with the intent that we're going to design this bridge, that's just not an engineer saying, okay, we'll do an overpass for an interstate. Well, that's not what we're going to ask for here, right? So I think,
It could be
if
a centerpiece at some on some levels
it could be,
with some build out and,
you make a statement, crossing like that
right,
and incorporate all these elements, I think it could be pretty special. Um, so yeah, I think, the community is going to stay focused on that.
right.
But that's, you look at the amazing improvements that the DDA is making at Huizinga Park.
Yep.
It's going to be, again, a glorious centerpiece for downtown.
Were you at the groundbreaking the other night?
I was not.
Yeah, I happened to walk by it. I just happened to be downtown, but it looked beautiful, the part they finished.
Well, you mentioned the Riverwalk, right? The Riverwalk is an amazing gem for Fort Lauderdale, and it's funny. I've lived here a while, and I was involved with an organization called Second Century Broward back in the '80s and '90s, and it was 100 people who had grown up here in Broward, Fort Lauderdale for the most part, and the reason they got together was that they knew the history of the community. They'd watched things change here, and they wanted locals natives that had spent time here to have a voice as well. Um, and we had this idea of a linear park right before Riverwalk existed, and there were a lot of proponents. It wasn't just Second Century Broward, but a lot of and again, these were younger, at the time, my younger generation, and we realized the importance of that. We wanted to limit the canyonization of the river. The idea was that we would scale back development, um, and that's worked a little bit. But the reality is it's not perfect. But I think the Riverwalk today. I mean, I walk it every day.
Yeah.
I've got Labrador retrievers.
Yep.
They expect to walk in the morning and a walk in
Yeah,
the
I know you
evening.
live down that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I live in Sailboat Bend. It's a great community.
Yeah, it is.
So we're on the Riverwalk every day. But to your point about the connectivity, some of the developments on the south side look phenomenal. And I think now that we've got some residential anchor buildings going on the south side,
Yeah, I think it'd be great.
it's a weird thing, right? A bridge is a mental barrier, right?
Right.
Like, oh, I gotta walk over Third Bridge to get to the south side or walk over
Yeah.
Andrews Avenue Bridge. You do it once or twice, you're like, "That's no big deal," right? You got stairs on both sides, you
I
go
used to
over.
walk all the way
Yeah.
around. It was great.
So, the restaurants on the south side, and I'm the worst because I'm like, "Well, we gotta cross the bridge." It's like,
Yeah.
"Really?"
There's some nice restaurants over there too, and they're
There
doing a good job.
there are, and Ozzy Symbol has been working
Yep.
on, his development on the south side. He's got some really cool things in mind for the parcels that he owns. So, yeah, there's a lot of activity, coming to that part of
And
downtown.
and Uptown. I mean, Fat Village. I mean, and BMR, and like there are some, what's going to happen with Galleria. There's going to be some major, I think, great developments coming in.
Well, and to the credit, I mean, we're utilizing, this whole idea of public-private partnerships as well, right? And that's part of where, if government taxpayers don't necessarily have the money to act on a good idea, but private enterprise does, and said, "Listen, let's partner on this," right? We'll
Right.
put the capital in. I mean, I visited the fort the other day. I'm not a pickleball player
I
yet.
I just visited for the first time too.
Isn't that
Amazing.
amazing?
Just
It's
amazing. What they did with the beach. I'm going to have a corporate event down there. It's
yeah.
just great.
And so you look at the Swimming Hall of Fame, again, another public-private
Right.
partnership. I had dinner at Ocean Prime the other day. That's part of the Los Olos
I just
Marina
went there the other night. Incredible.
experience. I mean, the service was phenomenal, and
Right.
there's a lot of good restaurants in town. I'm not pitching just one, but
Yeah.
um, it was a remarkable experience because of the training they put into their staff. And I'm always fascinated by that, right? So I talked to the bartenders and some of the people working there, and they told me how rigorous the training was, and part of it is an investment on their part, right? They want to be, working for one of the top restaurants in town. Some of that you put some sweat equity in before you start getting paid to do your training. But it's a good way to sort of test commitment on both sides of the equation. But you look at Los Olos Marina again. That's an amazing redevelopment of what was a languishing asset for us. So yeah, there's a lot of amazing things that are continuing to happen, and we're just I tell people this all the time. We're maturing as a community. We're just on the cusp of so many great things happening, and I think we've approached sort of the black brass ring before. But I think, in today's environment, we're going to surpass what we really had hoped that Fort Lauderdale would become. It's an 18-hour city now. I think we just have to tell the story and build that reputation.
Yeah.
But, on the business side, so, it's our job to tell that story, right?
Right.
How Greater Fort Lauderdale, Broward County is changing and maturing. But then look at the diversity of our industries that are here. Aviation, maintenance, repair, and overhaul
Yeah.
is
Huge.
expanding in such a dramatic way.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, and recently, Spirit Airlines has,
Yeah.
they went through bankruptcy and they exited. But part of, their strategy was developing, was cleaning up their balance sheet a little bit. And I'm reading in the paper that they sold $500 million worth of aircraft. So a $500 million worth of aircraft. The buyer
Yeah.
was another Broward County company. And I looked at that and, I had a couple of people in the media asking me about, well, you know, are you worried about what's happening with Spirit? I'm like, well, I'm always concerned. But I said, when you look at the power of aviation in this community, and then I use that transaction as an example. I mean, this shows the strength of aircraft finance, maintenance, repair, and overhaul. We've got companies that are expanding out into Coral Springs. Miramar has got a phenomenal concentration of these aviation repair companies, but the business is expanding and it's not slowing down. It's amazing to me. And then we've got Broward College as a partner in this that'll provide a student with virtually no debt the certification they need to work in the airline business.
Yeah, we had NetJets in here too.
I think you had Mark Pinko, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He's fantastic. So, to kind of wrap this up, we usually, give advice. At one point, we were the young guys in town. So if we're going to give advice to the next generation, and I have some, really involved young people here, and you were just talking about it. You're just talking about how Broward is, the brass ring is out there to be grabbed. What's your advice to some of the young people, or to some of the young businesses that might want to come down here?
Yeah. So I guess, it's I think our you and I are wired much the same way, right? You've been doing so much for the nonprofit community. Your annual pasta dinner is got such an amazing reputation, but it's something that you and your family have supported for many many years. It's not a one off. You didn't do it for publicity. You did it for a cause. Um, And I think so my recommendation to young people was, you know, find something that you're passionate in addition to family and business,
Yeah.
um, and don't make it transactional. You
Mm.
know, get involved, you know, those things will come if you're involved for the right reasons. You know, I remember early on, I was in the Rotary Club in downtown and
Great Rotary.
great group. And Ralph Marison was an active member. And, you know, Ralph was a force to be reckoned with
Of
in
course.
Broward County. Um, but I'm out there laying sod in DC Alexander Park on the beach with Ralph Marison for half a day in the morning on a Saturday. And I got to know him better in that 3.5 hours we were doing that work than all the Rotary lunches combined. And it really sent a message to me, and this was early on, this was in the '80s for me. Um, but I realized that when you roll up your sleeves and you work with other folks that you might like to get to know better, if you work together on a project that's not directly related to your business, you can create much deeper ties, and the opportunity to business is going to flourish from that. It might not be a direct transaction with that individual, but it could be a connection or somebody that they'll introduce you to, or another issue that's important to them that's also important to you. So, you know, all too often I'll go to a breakfast meeting and you got people just handing out business cards, you know, and they're doing business development. I'm like, well, you know, you really didn't create any kind of connection, right? And it's not transactional. And you know, they'll go to 4 of those breakfast meetings and they're like, well, that was a waste of time. So you can't approach it from expecting it to become an immediate transaction. I think people will measure you by, well, so what else is important to you? What else are you involved in? I always look for that. One of the things I look for when I add somebody to my team is curiosity, right? If you're intellectually curious, and you want to understand how and why things work the way they do, and you invest some time, we all feel like we're going 90 miles an hour, right? And we got, you know, family demands, we've got, you know, work demands, we've got all these things that, you know, we're sort of overwhelmed by. But you've got to, you know, make some of that investment in doing something that just makes your community a more desirable place to live. And, you know, you pick that out, right? You know, it's going to be different for each person. A guy got involved with Lab Rescue about 20 years ago. This is Lab Rescue's 25th anniversary,
Mm.
and they have saved over 25,000 Labrador retrievers.
Wow.
So over 1,000 a year that they've saved. Pretty impressive, right? And it's a
Yeah, very
statewide
impressive.
organization, all volunteer run. I'm a foster parent, so I actually have a foster dog living with us right now. But that's part of what I'm passionate about, right? And
Yeah, that's
it's each person needs to find something like that. Part of it is an outlet to do something different than what you
right.
would do day to day. But I recommend for people that are trying to build a business or build a sales career. You know, there's lots of opportunities out there. Be selective, but pick something that you wanna do it because there's a personal reason as much as there's a business professional reason.
Mm. Well, great advice, Bob. Amazing story. What's the best way to get in touch with the Alliance if somebody wants to move their company down here?
That's a great question. I'm so glad you asked. If you go to Life Less Taxing or just lesstaxing.com, those are our domains.
Nice.
That was Jordan Zimmerman's idea.
Yeah.
Jordan Zimmerman and Zev Auerbach were helping us with our creative back. This was 2008. But one of the things that people obviously, you know, like about Florida is our great tax structure. We don't have unfunded obligations like pension funds out there. We have a balanced budget every year as a state. Um, but lesstaxing.com is easy to remember. And if you go to lesstaxing.com, you will see a link that you can click on to watch Matthew Tkachuk talking about why he loves living in Fort Lauderdale. It's a quick 60 seconds.
We'll throw it on the end of
Yeah,
this.
that would be great. But his campaign is called "Work Harder, Live Better,"
There you
and
go.
we love it. It sort of sums up Fort Lauderdale.
Well, let's go Panthers. Thanks for coming in today, Bob. Really appreciate it, man. Thank
Andy,
you.
thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Another great episode of Coffee with Cagnetta. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bob, for coming in. See you soon.